The chapel was colder than the air outside. Not the sharp winter chill that nipped at the nose and cheeks, but a still, damp cold that sank beneath the skin and rooted itself in the marrow. The kind of cold that lingered even when you left, carrying it with you like a shadow you never asked for. I sat in the back row, hands folded tight in my lap, the veins along them standing out against skin softened only by years. My scarf, faded red wool, was wound twice about my throat, though it did nothing to ease the chill. I had come unseen, unnoticed. As I intended, the front pews were filled by the Caro family, my daughter-in-law. Her siblings, the business partners, who dressed like generals at parade. Their coats shone with polish, their jewels discreet but glinting with each flicker of candlelight. They sat upright, commanding as if they owned not just the pews but the very breath of the congregation. Even their whispers cut like razors, quiet yet sharp, rehearsed as if the funeral were no more than another boardroom meeting. No tears were shed, not even for appearance's sake. I did not cry either. My grief had outgrown tears long ago, calcifying into something heavier, something that pressed against my chest with every breath. On the altar rested the polished oak casket, its sheen immaculate, untouched by the fractures that had torn through the rest of us. Inside lay my son Elias Caro, though truthfully, the boy I had raised, the man I once knew, had been gone years before his body gave up its final breath. We had become strangers in silence. His voice had faded from my life into brief messages, perfunctory texts at birthdays, sterile notes at Christmas. His wife Loretta, always the one to extend invitations that never felt like invitations at all, but announcements of where they would be, what they would host, and whether I wished to come or not. The spaces between us stretched wider with each passing year until it felt as if he had drifted out to sea and I remained at shore. Watching Loretta stood now at the pulpit, her composure exact, her black dress without a wrinkle. Her eulogy was flawless, words strung like pearls, thanking directors, colleagues, and benefactors. Her speech was not a farewell to a husband or a father, but a press release to a room of investors. Not once did she say his name with the softness of love. Not once did she speak of him as a son or as a man with laughter and sorrow. I listened, hands cold and still, as though the woman had scrubbed him clean of humanity, polishing away even his memory. When the service ended, the scrape of chairs and shuffle of coats filled the silence. I lingered, rising slow, careful not to draw eyes. I was nearly free of the chill when the doors opened again. A man entered, a tall figure in a gray coat, his hair dark, his stride purposeful. He ignored the others entirely and walked straight to me. His voice, low but steady, spoke my name. Mrs. Halloway. I stiffened. Yes. He offered a small nod, his gaze solemn but unwavering. My name is Daniel Mercer. Your son asked me to be here. From his pocket, he drew out a small black USB drive, holding it with both care and weight, as if it were sacred. He wanted you to have this. I froze. Memories struck quick, unmercifully Elias as a boy. Clutching my hand after his father's accident on the docks, his wide eyes searching for answers I never had. Nights I worked cleaning offices, my back aching just to keep the house warm. Pancakes in the shape of stars on mornings, I wanted him to remember that magic existed even in hardship. The quilt I stitched from worn shirts, each patch sewn with the hope he'd feel wrapped in love when I was not there. I had sold my grandmother's ring to help him take his place at Harvard. I had given everything until one day he stopped answering. My letters returned, my gifts unacknowledged. I thought I had been erased at the reception. I saw my grandson, Simon, tucked among the adults who loomed over him. His small hands clutched a flimsy cup of lemonade, his face pale, as though grief had made him too fragile to stand upright. I crouched beside him, my knees protesting. Are you holding up, sweetheart? He nodded quickly, glancing about to ensure no one listened before leaning toward me. His whisper trembled. Grandma, Daddy used to look at your pictures. My chest tightened. What pictures? The blue ones? From your gallery. I blinked. That gallery had been mine alone, posted online under a pseudonym, never shared with him. I had painted skies of dusk and shadow, colors born of sleepless nights. I had not told Elias, yet somehow he had found them, kept them, cherished them. My throat burned. Perhaps he had never truly forgotten me at all. That evening, Daniel Mercer gathered us into a hotel's private chamber. A long polished table stretched between us, the Caro family arrayed like a council of judges. Loretta sat rigid, her eyes gleaming with quiet triumph, as though victory were assured. I slipped into a chair near the door. Invisible as always, the lights dimmed. The projector flickered. My son appeared on the screen, his face thinner than memory, his eyes tired but steady. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of finality. "If you are watching this, then I am gone. Mother, this is for you." My hands gripped the chair as if to steady the room. Elias inhaled, exhaled, steeling himself. I let distance grow between us. "I thought your silence was neglect." "It wasn't. It was stolen. Loretta intercepted your letters. She rerouted your emails. She made sure I never saw them, and I believed her." The room shifted, whispers sharp, Loretta's jaw clenching like steel. Elias's voice cut on. "I should have trusted my gut. I should have remembered who always showed up. Mother, you always loved me. And because of that, you will carry forward what I built. Everything goes to Youth House, the investments, the manuscripts, and most of all, the foundation for young artists and coders. One day, Simon will inherit it. To Loretta, I leave only a check for $5,000. And a book titled How to Be Kind, gasps, rippled. My breath caught, my heart a heavy stone. Loretta erupted, spitting fury, calling it fraud, a cruel fabrication. But her voice rang hollow against the steady, undeniable presence of Elias on the screen. His words reverberated, sealing themselves into air and memory alike. 2 days later, Daniel met me at a quiet cafe. He placed a leather-bound journal before me, its cover worn by my son's hand. "He wanted you to have this," Daniel said softly. I opened it slowly. Elias's handwriting spilled across the pages. Memories of me, I thought, forgotten, how I hummed while making pancakes, how I patched his backpack with stars, how I lit candles when the power was cut so he wouldn't be afraid. Regrets bled through his words, apologies inked into every line. Tucked between the pages was a photograph of one of my paintings in indigo sky. Annotated in his hand, "Dunley Dusk." I remember this sky. On the final page, in even script, he had written, "They lied to me. But she always loved me. I see it now." I pressed the book to my chest. The ache shifted. Not vanished, never that, but reshaped into something weighty, undeniable. Something I could carry without breaking. I moved into his Beacon Hill home. His walls bore one of my paintings framed in care. I opened windows that had long been sealed, filling rooms with light. I stood before boardrooms, before schools, building the fellowship he had envisioned, my voice steady where once it had faltered. I carried him forward. Months passed. Then, one gray afternoon, an envelope arrived. The handwriting shaky, uneven, but young. Inside was a crayon drawing me, with silver hair and a red scarf. Holding hands with Elias. Beneath it read, "Grandma, Daddy would be proud. Love, Simon. I did not weep. Instead, I pressed the paper to my chest until the crayon wax warmed under my palms. That weekend, I carried it to the cemetery. I laid it against the stone and sat on the damp grass. "You saw me, Elias," I whispered, "and I see you now." The wind stirred the trees. Shadows stretched across the ground, not to suffocate, but to walk alongside me. For the first time in years, they felt like companions. But the story did not end there. For in the weeks that followed, as I settled into the house, I pored over his journals and manuscripts. I began to notice patterns, strange omissions, cryptic notes, and names I did not know. Elias had left more behind than apologies. He had left threads of a mystery, one that reached beyond Loretta's cruelty and into shadows I had never known existed. And as the nights grew long, I felt the chill return, not from the air, but from something unseen waiting to be uncovered. The house was not silent. Not truly. Its walls held whispers that seeped through plaster and wood, voices carried on drafts that curled under doorframes. At first I thought it was my mind weaving illusions in the wake of grief. But the longer I stayed, the clearer it became that Elias had left behind echoes far louder than absence. I began in his study. The room Loretta had locked with a brass key kept in her vanity drawer. Daniel had found it and slipped it into my palm with a quiet warning. "There's more here than you expect." He had not been wrong. The air was thick with dust, but his desk was too neat, papers arranged with precision, as though he had prepared for someone to search after his death. The first drawer yielded journals more than the one Daniel had given me, each filled with hurried sketches, notes in the margins, and fragments of conversations half recorded. Names appeared underlined: Clayton Rusk, Marianne Layton, Harbor Point Trust. I knew none of them. At night, I sat by the window, the journals spread across my lap, piecing together the puzzle of his last years. He wrote of money moved in silence, of promises made and broken, of Loretta's shadow growing larger until it swallowed everything. And yet, between the entries, found tenderness, memories of my hands braiding his hair as a boy, the way I sang him to sleep when storms shook the house. Each recollection was a thread pulling me deeper into both love and unease. Then came the notebook with the cipher. Pages upon pages of symbols, numbers, and slashes. I traced them with my finger, baffled, until I found a single line scrawled on the inside cover. "Ask Daniel. He will know." The next morning, I called him to the house. He arrived with tired eyes, as though he too carried Ilias's ghosts. He examined the pages, lips pressed tight. This is dangerous," he murmured. "He never should have put you in the middle. What does it mean?" I pressed. He hesitated before answering. "It's a ledger, not just of money, but of leverage. Secrets, debts, blackmail. Elias was trying to protect someone. Maybe you, maybe Simon. But if Loretta discovers you have this—" He trailed off, eyes dark. "You must keep it hidden." The unease inside me deepened, a pit without bottom. For all his brilliance, Elias had entangled himself in something vast, and I was left with the pieces. That night, as I locked the study, I caught sight of Simon standing in the hallway, his small frame silhouetted against the glow of the lamp. He looked at me with wide eyes. "Grandma," he whispered, "Daddy used to say monsters aren't under the bed. They're in the papers." I gathered him into my arms, my heart shattering. He knew more than a child ever should. The days that followed carried tension like a taut wire. Loretta visited the house unannounced, her smile brittle, her questions sharp. She prowled through rooms under the guise of collecting mementos, her fingers lingering too long on locked doors. I kept the journals hidden beneath the floorboards of my room, a place no one would think to search. Each night I prayed the house would not betray me. One evening Daniel returned, his face pale. "There are others involved. Harbor Point Trust isn't just a bank, it's a shell, a laundering ground for men who would burn this city to ash for profit. Elias tried to expose them. That's why his foundation matter wasn't just for art. It was a shield. It's a way to funnel money where it couldn't be touched." I stared at him, trembling. "And now? And now they may think you know more than you do." The truth came in shards. Elias had discovered Loretta's family tied to Harbor Point. Her marriage to him had been no accident, but a move to control and silence. She had cut me out not for spite alone, but because she feared my influence, my persistence. And when Elias resisted, when he sought to leave a legacy beyond her grasp, he became a liability. The thought that his death had been mere chance dissolved. Darkness pooled in the spaces between my memories. Simon clung closer to me. He asked often about the stories Elias had told me, hungry for pieces of his father untainted by Loretta's rehearsed grief. I showed him paintings, shared songs, whispered tales of stars stitched into backpacks. In his eyes, I saw Ilias's gentleness reborn, fragile but unbroken. Then, late one night, the phone rang. A voice low and distorted spoke only a single sentence. "Leave the past buried. Mrs. Halloway, or you'll join him." The line clicked dead. I sat frozen, the chill of the chapel returning, colder than bone. For the first time since Elias's death, I wept. Not out of grief, but fear. Yet beneath the fear was resolve, steady and immovable. I had already lost my son to their shadows. I would not let them steal my grandson, too. The following days blurred into a quiet battle. Loretta pressed legal claims against the estate, though Elias's video and will held firm. Still, her allies circled like vultures. Men in gray suits lingering outside the house. Letters arriving with no return address, filled with threats cloaked as warnings. Daniel urged caution, but I found myself moving deeper into Elias's world, guided by the journals he had left behind. Each revelation was a blade, cutting away what little illusion remained. In one entry, written shaky and uneven, Elias confessed, "I fear they will come for Simon. If anything happens to me, Mother must protect him. Tell her the sky is always blue at dusk." She know. The words jolted me. The phrase was one Elias had spoken as a boy. Pointing at sunsets we watched together. "The sky is always blue at dusk, even when it looks red. You just have to look deeper." It was his way of saying truth hid beneath appearance. He had left me not just warnings, but instructions. I searched the study anew, running fingers along spines of books, tapping for hollow panels. Behind the row of law volumes, I found it, a narrow compartment sealed with tape. Inside lay a packet of letters bound with twine, each addressed to me but never delivered. My breath caught as I opened them. His words spilled out pleas for advice, confessions of fear, declarations of love. Letters spanning years, all stolen by Loretta, all silenced before they could reach me. The theft of them hurt more than any blow could. Yet within them lay maps, diagrams, directions to a storage unit across the river. I knew then that Elias had prepared for this. He had not left me to drown in mystery. He had left me a trail. When Daniel and I arrived at the unit, the lock was rusted but yielded under his tools. Inside were boxes stacked high, filled with ledgers, photographs, even tapes. The breadth of what Elias had uncovered was staggering. Records of bribes, offshore accounts, of men in high offices whose reputations would crumble if truth surfaced. Among them was Loretta's name, tied again and again to transactions that smelled of rot. "Do you see what this means?" Daniel whispered, awe and dread mingling. "If this ever goes public, they'll come for Simon first." I interrupted, my voice iron. "He is Elias's blood. They will try to erase him just as they erased me." We left with only what we could carry, hiding the rest. But from that moment, shadows thickened around us. I saw cars idling too long outside the house, men with unfamiliar eyes watching from corners. I heard footsteps where there should be none. Fear became constant. But so too did determination. Simon brought me another drawing one evening, a picture of the house with windows bright. He and I standing inside. Underneath, in crooked letters, he wrote, "Home is safe when Grandma is here." I held him close, whispering promises I had no right to make but would die keeping. The truth was a storm pressing at the edges of our lives. And I knew it would break soon. Elias had left me not just a legacy of love, but a battlefield strewn with enemies hidden in shadows. As I sat by the window that night, the journals and ledgers spread before me. I felt the weight of his final gift. They thought I was an old woman too weak to fight. They thought they had silenced me years ago. But grief had carved me into stone, and love had set fire in my chest. I whispered into the dark, to Elias, to myself, "I see you, and I will finish what you began." The wind stirred the curtains, carrying with it the faintest echo of his voice. Not memory, not illusion, but presence. My companion in the shadows, urging me forward. The night stretched long, and with it came resolve. For the first time in years, I was not afraid of the dark. I was part of it, and it was part of me. The storm broke sooner than I expected. It came not with thunder, but with footsteps, papers, and whispers swelling into threats that could no longer be ignored. Loretta struck first. She filed another petition, one that questioned my mental capacity, arguing that grief and age had left me unfit to oversee Ilias's estate. Her lawyer spoke with venom wrapped in silk, insisting Simon belonged in her custody alone, that the foundation Elias had built should be protected from me. The hearing was set for a Thursday morning. Daniel stood beside me, his jaw clenched as we walked into the courthouse. Loretta gleamed in black, her pearls catching the light, her allies filling the benches behind her like a silent army. I sat small but steady, the weight of Elias's journal in my bag, the truth tucked under my arm like a shield. When her lawyer rose, he painted me as frail, confused, manipulated. He spoke of wild allegations, of fabricated documents, of misinterpretations of grief. I sat through it in silence, my palms pressed flat against the wood before me, my heartbeat steady as a drum. Then it was my turn. Daniel guided me forward, but it was my voice that carried. "I am old," I said, and the room hushed. "I am tired, but I am not weak. My son trusted me when no one else would. He left me his words, his work, his truth, and I will honor them." I opened the journal, turning to the pages that bore Ilias's hand. His writing filled the room more than my own voice could. He had written of Loretta's theft, her manipulation, her ties to Harbor Point. He had written names, dates, numbers. He had left behind a ledger of rot. I handed copies to the judge, to the court, each page a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples that could not be undone. Loretta's face broke then, not with tears but with fury. She stood shouting denials, spitting venom, until the judge's gavel cracked against the bench. But the tide had turned. Daniel produced the storage unit records, photographs, bank slips, all proof of Elias's discoveries. Piece by piece, we built the case Elias had died preparing. The court ruled swift. I retained guardianship of Simon and control of Elias's foundation. Loretta was referred to the authorities for investigation, her allies scattering like insects when light finds them. She left the courtroom pale, a woman who had lost not only wealth but her mask. In the days that followed, newspapers printed fragments of Elias's notes. Harbor Point's men denied, then crumbled under the weight of evidence. Names once untouchable fell. The city stirred with rumors of corruption, of power undone by a dead man's hand. And through it all, Simon stayed close to me, his small hand in mine, drawings filling the house with color. One evening, weeks after, we walked together to the cemetery. He carried a folded paper in his pocket. When we reached Ilias's stone, he placed it gently at its base. A drawing of 3 figures: Elias, Simon, and me standing under a wide indigo sky streaked with gold. Above us, in shaky letters, Simon had written, "The sky is always blue at dusk." I knelt in the grass, my hand on the stone. "You saw me, Elias. You trusted me. And I carried you forward." The ache in my chest remained, but it no longer hollowed me out. It filled me steady and warm. That night I returned to the house. I opened the windows wide. The air moved freely, carrying scents of rain and the hum of the city. In the study, the ledgers were gone, passed to those who would see justice done. What remained were Elias's paintings, my own, and Simon's growing gallery taped proudly to the walls. The shadows that once haunted me no longer pressed with menace. They lingered, yes, but as companions, now, reminders of battles fought, of love proven. I had walked through the dark and carried my son's light with me. Simon ran through the hall, his laughter ringing out, sharp and sweet. I followed, slower but content, the sound of him enough to banish silence. For the first time in decades, the house was alive. And for the first time since Ilias's death, I let myself smile without guilt. The past had not buried me. It had shaped me into stone and flame. And though age bent my bones, my spirit stood unbroken. I would carry Simon forward. I would guard what Elias had built, and when my time came, I would leave knowing I had kept my promise. The night deepened, stars pricking the sky above Beacon Hill. I stood at the window, the city alive with light below, and whispered one last time into the quiet, "I see you, my son, and you will never be forgotten. The wind stirred, soft and familiar. Not chasing, not suffocating. Simply walking beside me as it always had. And I walked on, steady, unafraid, into the blue dusk.